Hello, fellow Rosarians. Thank you for joining me today. I have received a couple of requests to do a video on how to take care of roses during the fall. As you can see, it is beautiful weather right now. The leaves are changing. Things are slowing down, but the temperatures at night are heading down to the lower 40s. But during the day, we still have 70 degrees, which is amazing to go ahead and get things done that have been on our checklist. So if you've been hunting and pecking around on the internet and looking for fall care for roses, there really isn't a lot of information out there. So why is that? Because there's not a lot to do. It really is time to kick up your feet and take in the final blooms in your garden. Be thinking about the coming season, planning for what you want to do in the winter. But I know if you're like me, we have been going. We have been running a marathon since spring, fertilizing once a month, deadheading, cutting back, looking for cane borers, looking for pest and disease. And so we've just gotten ourselves in a rhythm of doing something every day to maintain the roses. And so I understand as we enter fall and things are slowing down that you're thinking, what do I do now? So I wanted to tell you what I'm doing. And let's go ahead and look at that list that I created from the video last year on 9 tasks to take care of during winter. Let's put that up on the screen. You'll have a link at the top that you can click on to dig into that if you want more details. But looking at that list, these are things that we're going to take care of during the winter, and you can wait. You don't have to do it now. But in the event that you want to get a head start on it, let's dig through some of these things and talk about what you can do and why we do it. If you are an expert on fall care and an experienced rosarian, maybe you just want to fast forward to the end because I'm going to give you guys a tour of how the garden looks right now. And I think it'll make a lot of you feel better if you are behind, because I am really behind in our garden right now. But I will share that with you. Maybe we'll see some roses that are in bloom. So if we look at that winter care checklist, I do want to add one more to that list, which is remove roses that are not performing so that we can plan for our spring orders. Let's think about why we do some of these things. A lot of our gardening is driven by our hardiness zone, and we drive to freeze and frost dates. So let's pull up the hardiness zone so that you can look at where you're located. I'm in 7B in Maryland. With that, I know that if I Google my zip code and say, zip code frost date, it's going to pull up the Farmer's Almanac. And the Farmer's Almanac will give you your exact date for your city. Now, I say exact. Let me take that back. Your approximate frost date and freeze date. How these dates are driven, it's from an average. They're just looking at the past decade or more and saying this is typically when it is. Now, as there may be global warming, you may find that this date changes. So don't assume every year it's going to be the same. It might change slightly by a day or two. So for me, in zone 7B, my first frost date is October the 29th. You can see also on this chart, what I've written down for you is when is the last date to fertilize, and when the spring rolls around, when is the last frost, so that you know when to expect to plant in the spring, because you want to wait typically after that frost date. So when we think about that date that you're given for your approximate first frost for the fall, why is that important? Why it's important is because we want to plan when our last fertilization is and when should we be putting plants in the ground. So what we do is you take that date, I'm going to back off 6 weeks from that, and 6 weeks prior should be my last fertilization. We choose that date because when you put fertilizer on the ground, you're going to be pushing new growth if the rose is awake. And so when it's pushing that new growth, it's tender, it's red, and you just don't want that tender growth to get hit by that frost, because it will in all likelihood kill that growth. So we Plan 6 weeks beforehand, knowing it's going to take 2 weeks to probably get in the plant system until we start seeing that new growth. So now we're 2 weeks into that 6 weeks prior. We've got 4 weeks then to harden it off. I hope that's not too many numbers for you, dates for you, but just plan 6 weeks to allow that fresh growth to harden off. If you miss your 6 weeks prior, is it going to be okay if your rose is pushing that new growth and it's hit by that first frost? Probably. It'll probably be okay. But in some cases, it will get hit. That section will die. And so it's 4 to 6 inches that will have to be cut off because it's going to be dead. So is it a life-changing event to worry about? No, it's going to be fine. But just you don't want to waste that time that you fertilized. So 6 weeks prior, plan on that. Let's also talk about new plantings. We try to sync getting your new plantings in ground with that last fertilization for a similar reason. If you have 5 consecutive days of freezing temperatures, the ground is going to freeze. So we want to get those new plantings in the ground with those tender baby roots and give them time to get settled before the ground freezes. I am still planting today just because I know my zone. And I know that through experience that my ground doesn't actually freeze until January. So for a new rosarian, just be targeting 6 weeks prior to that freeze date. But then as you get more experienced, you'll know exactly when your ground freezes, because we're all going to be out there kind of picking around. Just put a shovel in the ground and see if it's frozen. So for me, at the end of December, it's starting to get frozen. It's definitely frozen in January. And you don't want to be messing around and trying to put a shovel in the ground. It's very difficult. So everybody's zone is going to be different, and a lot of it is just going to come from experience. So this is just general guidelines for you. So we've talked about fertilization. We've talked about our plantings. Deadheading. Am I deadheading right now? Typically, I would be, because I can't stand expired blooms on a rose. But in this case, what I've learned through gardening in this environment is leave the last blooms on. If you can, focus on other projects, because often I'm finding that roses that typically are not noted as producing hips, they do, and they've surprised me. And the hips are a beautiful orange-red color. They feed the wildlife, and it just provides winter interest. So if you can tolerate it, and it doesn't drive you crazy, just go ahead and leave the blooms on, focus on something else, and see if they produce hips for you. If they don't, in the following year, you'll know, and you can continue to deadhead them. Let's talk about the height on the roses. We want to only take down the height if they have gotten really leggy. I know in the heat of the summer, some of these roses are towering up about above 7 foot. They're hard for me to keep down at that 3 foot height. And in the event that I've kind of let them go after their last flush, you want to bring down that height so that the wind doesn't snap the canes in the winter. But you want to leave them approximately at waist high so that it allows for the rose to get through winter. And in the event that there's winter dieback, which you cannot prevent, and it'll, zap maybe 6 to 12 inches, depending on how hard your winter is. Sometimes it doesn't happen at all, but in the event that it does, you just allow that extra height on the rose so that after spring, you cut off what has not made it through the winter on the canes, and now you're at knee height or 18 inches or so for that spring prune. So go ahead and cut them back now to waist high, approximately 3 foot, just to allow them to have time to get through winter. There are 2 exceptions to that. Your climbers. So we're not going to trim our climbers down to 3 feet. Your climbers, I'm hoping that you have secured either by pegging or to a structure, whether it's an arbor, a fence, a house. You want to go and check those ties and make sure that it's secure. Look for your main canes, and then the laterals that are coming off of it. I'm going to put up a picture here for you. The laterals you can go ahead and cut back to, say, 6 inches right now. Clean it up, defoliate it, but you're not going to cut the entire climber down to waist high. Another exception to that is one-time bloomers. An easy way to remember it is if it's a one-time bloomer, a lot of your antique roses are, you have one time to prune it so that you don't affect the blooms for the coming season. For your one-time bloomers, you need to cut them back at the end of their flush in spring or summer, whenever it is that they're doing their bloom, because they put on their new blooms on the old growth. So you want to make sure that you take care of that in the event that you've missed that and you didn't prune them back because you didn't know. We all do it, or we get too busy, life gets in the way. In that case, and you want to have the blooms for the coming season, just secure them. If they've gotten really leggy, go ahead and give them some support, go ahead and peg them down, make a note on your calendar that for the next bloom that it has, to cut it back. For those cuts that we've made, if the cut is larger than a pencil, you want to make sure that you're using bonide sealer or some kind of a sealer to seal that cane. If it's the size of a pencil or larger, it is ideal for cane borers. They really want to get into that soft pith and burrow for the winter. And if they burrow, wherever they burrow, you're going to find that that cane dies back, and you can kind of watch down the cane to see how far it's gotten. So keep on trimming down until you don't see a hole in that pith anymore. You hope that they don't get all the way down to the crown. They can. And if they get all the way down to the crown, in all likelihood, that entire cane will die, and it could affect the rose's ability to thrive. Am I worried about defoliating right now? If you have time and the energy and you want to defoliate the rose, go ahead and pull off all of the leaves that are affected by black spot or any other disease. You can go ahead and pull those off so that they're not dropping into the bed. Most roses will drop their leaves on their own when they go to sleep, but with these modern roses, a lot of times they're holding on to their leaves. Do you have to defoliate a rose? No, but you just want to give it the best start for the spring. So I defoliate kind of and pick as I go along, because I'm also trying to see, when are the roses asleep? When are they ready to move? So if you're taking off those leaves and it doesn't push back new leaf growth, usually within 2 weeks, the rose is asleep and it's going dormant, and now it's safe to move it. So that's a good indicator for you also. When are my roses asleep? While I'm on that thread, is it possible, I'll see out there, I'm putting my roses to bed, how do I get them to go dormant? You can't. Don't waste your energy or time on how do I put a rose to sleep. It's going to go to sleep when it's ready. And how does it know that it's time to go to sleep? It's the temperature change in your environment. Something about, the cold nights and an extended period of cold nights, it really slows down to the rose to the point where it's going to go dormant. So I don't want you to stress about, when do I put my rose to sleep? It's going to do it on its own. And some of them, these modern roses, are going to keep blooming through the winter. They're not going to go to sleep. And if you have one of those roses, please go ahead and put it down in the comments below, because we all want to know which roses that we need to add to our garden to keep us going through the winter. Talking about those leaves again, I want you all to clean out the beds. Take out any dropped leaves, because we want to give that rose the best start for the coming season. It's a place for insects to hide in your bed if you have dropped leaves. So go ahead and blow out the beds. Are we taking care of canes that have died right now? Sure. If you've got time to kill and you want to do that, you can do it now until spring. So just be careful, because sometimes older canes have a woody appearance. It looks like it might be dead, so make a little snip on the top. See if you can snap it with your hand, then it truly is dead. Cut it and look and see if you see green pith in there. So just be very careful if you want to trim back dead canes. When we're looking at mulching our roses for winter, you can take a minimalist approach on that and just mulch the cane. So we put compost down to nourish the beds, soften the soil, improve the aeration, foundation. So compost is awesome. But when it comes to mulching the beds, unless you're doing the entire bed and you just want to focus on protecting the rows, you're going to insulate the crown itself. Depending on what zone you're in, it's a hot topic, whether people bury the crown or if it's slightly exposed. For me, what I've learned down by the waterfront is I have to bury those, the crowns, just for extra insulation. The wind coming off of the river, it's real tough for those roses. So not only am I making sure that my crowns are dug properly underground, but then I'm also bringing a little bit of mulch to insulate that cane. So just take a hard look at your crowns to make sure, in the event that they're a little bit above the ground and you are in a cold environment, get it mulched up really good. Depending on where you are, and you might want to talk to your local rosarians, they actually put, and I'm thinking zone 4, 5, maybe 6, you all put cages around your roses or collars, and then you know, after you have these stakes in, you bring in leaves, put them inside, put burlap around the whole thing. So there are things that you may have to do that I don't in zone 7 and up, because our roses don't need as much protection. So thinking about the protection, let's talk about our standards really quick. I've done a video on that. I love the new solution that I have for insulating the standards. I just got something that looks like a pool noodle, and it's from your hardware store, and it's pipe insulation. And I did a video on that. I checked on those roses, the standards, all through last winter. I took off the pipe insulator to look at it to make sure that water wasn't, you know, rotting and getting stuck in there and affecting the trunk of the rose. They were fine. And so it's a quick, easy solution. 1 minute, pop it on, you're done. So I highly recommend, if you have standards, an easy way to deal with that. In the event that you don't want to use a pipe insulation for standards, you need to put your stakes in the ground, put the burlap around it, and then put leaves through to insulate your standards for the winter. Let's see, thinking about those climbers in very cold environments, I think that they untie the climbers from the support, lay them down to the ground, use landscape ties to hold them down to the ground, and then you bring in mulch and put it on, a couple of inches of mulch, and put it on top to protect those climbers. In zone 7, 8, 9, 10, we don't have to do that. If you are in a zone below 6, check with your local rosarians and see what they are doing for their climbers. Finally, potted roses, what am I doing? I've already started co-locating all of the potted plants and roses together up against the siding so that they're all nestled together and insulating each other. And then I'm taking mulch bags and putting them up against those that are on the outskirts of that pile, making sure that they're not underneath an overhang so that they're still getting watered from the elements, whether that's snow or rain. And you just need to make sure that it's your potted roses or plants are getting water, just a little bit, once a month, every 30 days. Even though they're dormant, they're still going to need a little bit of water, and I would have a water meter and just check it once a month and make sure that they're not completely dry. So let's look at that list one final time now and see what can we do now based on all of this information that I've given you. Can we add a compost layer in the fall? Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great time anytime to be improving your soil. Remove cane borers? Sure, absolutely, if you can see them. A lot of times it's not easy to see the cane borers until the rose is completely defoliated, but if you can definitely see that you have damage to a cane borer, go ahead and take care of that. And then if the cane is larger than a pencil in diameter, make sure that you're putting that pruning sealer on it. Are we clipping the roses to waist high? I'm going to put a yellow on here. That is entirely up to you. based on whether is it a climber, you're not going to do that. Is it an old garden rose, one-time bloomer, you're not going to do that. But if it's a shrub, yes, go ahead and bring down the height if you do not have hips that you want to grow on that rose that you'll be watching through the winter. Am I defoliating all of the rose leaves? That's a yellow. That's up to you. Do you have the energy to do that? Go ahead. I have so many roses that I'm really just going to wait until the winter when I'm looking for something to do, and then I will go through and tackle that task. Just make sure that you're getting any leaves out of the bed that have a fungus so that you're giving your rose the best start for spring. Trim your deadwood carefully. We've talked about that. Sometimes the rose has aged canes that are they look dead. But you just have to look closely because you don't want to be taking off your canes. Clean the beds of black spot leaves. We talked about that. Yes, always do that. Planning moves for plants. If you want to move them now and you're thinking that they're slowing down in dormancy, fall and winter is a good time. Ideal during the winter before your ground freezes when the rose is asleep. I go ahead and put biotone in the hole. The rose is not going to push the rose to have new growth because the rose is asleep. So just putting the biotone in the hole, it will be available when the rose wakes up in the spring. So use a little bit of biotone to give it a good start. I wait to protect the standards until it's consistently in the 30s. Now in the 70s, I don't need to do that yet. One final thing. Start walking around your gardens and looking for roses that didn't perform for you. In the next video I put together, we're going to talk about making those hard choices. We're all planning for our spring orders right now, and we want to make sure that we're only keeping roses in our garden that are consistently performing. And so I want to share with you who gets shovel pruned, which ones did not make it through the year, and they're going to be relegated to a pot for a bit. So we're going to go ahead and take a tour around the garden right now. I think it's going to make you all feel really good because I have a list of things that I'm still working on. I've got to get bulbs in the ground. I've got to create new beds, mulch beds, clip things down. The roses have black spot. I've got, 600 bags, I think, of mulch here that I'm putting down. So you're going to feel good when you look and you see everything that I've got going on if you're still a little bit behind. So we've had a lot of projects going on, one of which is increasing most of the beds, and it has felt like it's been nonstop planting and moving. If you look here, this is where the original bed ended, and after going on our trip to England and seeing how large those beds were, I decided that I could at least increase by another 8 feet or so. So there was work involved in that, in tarping off the area, measuring, and then moving. It just feels like it's been non-stop moving plants, and that brings me anxiety because they look so pretty in previous seasons with the Nepeta and the Salvia, and my fear is, oh my gosh, what if they don't come back? They've put on such a beautiful show. So we'll wait and see how it goes and how easily they move. I still have a lot of other moves to make, and I'll talk to you about that here soon. I've got phlox. Now, this was right behind the boxwood. Now I want to move that box behind these benches here. So I've added benches because I decided that you can never have enough seating. And some of the gardens that we went to, this is holding it down because the wind is so heavy, it'll move. Some of the gardens that we went to, and there's one on the opposite side, there wasn't enough seating, and I realized I had the same problem at my house. So I've added benches, and I'm also going to be adding additional benches down by the water. So if we look at the beautiful fall color, the red buds are looking really pretty, and you can see that I've just initially mulched the front of all of the new beds to hold down the tarp, and so it doesn't look so crazy to me and finished. But I do have additional mulching to do, and depending on how many bags I have, we'll see if I'm going to do that now or in the spring. And it's always frustrating because I put down this beautiful black mulch and within a very short period, hours, it's covered by pine needles and leaves, and I can never, it's never clean. I'm always going to have dropping leaves and such from my neighbor's property. So Boscabelle is blooming. And also this is a Jalbert rose, and this is called Peter's Joy. And Peter's Joy in its first year has been very pretty for us. So if you're seeing yellowing leaves in your roses, that is perfectly healthy and normal. That's just the rose getting ready to slow down and go dormant, and that's part of the leaf drop process. I have not been deadheading, although that typically drives me crazy. I have decided that I want to see which roses produce hips. I've been really surprised when a rose isn't noted as producing hips, and when I leave the buds, it does, and that will feed the wildlife through the winter. So it's good to leave it as long as you can tolerate it. And you can see that Bliss Parfuma is getting ready to give me a flush here at the end of the season. So we've got Vanessa Bell blooming in here. Everybody's really giving me one last push. I've got Crazy Love down here. And then who else? The Poet's Wife in its first year has been amazing. I bought that as a potted plant in the fall from David Austin, and it's easily 3 foot tall. So I'm very happy. Is this a little bee sleeping? It is. Oh, how sweet. So this is Summer Memories from Cortez. Summer Memories is the white. Summer Sun is the pink. So now let's talk about what's going on here. I've got a lot of work to still do. You can see where my temporary line is here that I've run. So what we decided is we're partnering with Star Roses in the next season, and Star is going to provide their Scentables line for us for these beds. So I want you to picture all of these roses and shrubs being moved. I'm gonna look over here. I've already started moving everything. I need to move the larger hydrangea, and now I want you to picture boxwood, and it's going to be, lining each of these beds. I'm going to have a bench here, a stone bench from Unique Stone, and then also on this side, a stone bench from Unique Stone. All of this will be newly seeded with grass. So you'll have a nice line of sight from the benches being able to look at each other. And I want you to picture 100 roses now filling these quads. So the Scentables line, I'm going to put a link up at the top of the screen. It's Star Roses, highly petaled, highly scented roses. So if you're not familiar with that line, it's going to be Earth Angel, Sweet Mademoiselle, Michelangelo, Top Cream, Bolero, Raspberry Cupcake. I think it's called Orchid Romance. I mean, there's so many roses. So I'm going to pop a link up here at the top of the screen for you to check it out. But this entire area, all the way to the fence now, will be just a swath of color. It's going to be so pretty. It's going to warm my heart. So then here, I'm thinking that I might need to level this off in the future because I do have a little bit of a grade, but this will be a stone bench with the boxwood, encasing it. I do have Budelia. Actually, it's not Budelia. It is Baptisia behind it. I've moved those. I'm hoping they're going to come back. Who is this? Is this Claire? Saint Cecilia. Looking pretty. And then I've got some buds here on Polar Express that are actually looking pink. State of Grace has not been a great rose for me, but you guys, look at this. Is this amazing? This is Francis Mealand. He smells as wonderful as you would expect. I mean, it's an awesome rose. He has given me a flush over the past 2 weeks, and these blooms, I mean, I've got 4 blooms, but they are just breathtaking with the size and the color. And I'm really hoping that in the next season that he gives me a flush over the entire shrub. Right now, he's great for cutting and putting in vases if you look at how long his stems are. So consider him, but you can see that he needs some room. He is at least 5 foot tall right now. So if we keep on looking around, keeping in mind all of this is going to come out. Who do we have here? Fighting Temeraire is giving us some color. We've got Grace, Eustacia Vi, another Cortez rose back here, a Veranda rose. So one of the things that I want to share with you here is Peggy Martin. We planted 4 Peggy Martins, 2 here and 2 over on this side after, oh, isn't that sunrise pretty? After the hurricane, when the waters came up on the property, I decided that I really wanted to put in some things that could withstand maybe once a year being underwater. And I thought, what better rose than Peggy Martin? So this came to me from a band, from A Reverence for Roses. The base of the plant is down here, and you can see that in however many months, this is easily 12 feet already. So we're going to have to manage Peggy. I can tell that she's going to be very aggressive, but we're going to make sure that we're going to put her up against the fence on both sides. And I also have for the other 2 another fence location. And I can see her over here, this one. Can you see her arching here across? So she's another, 12 foot easy there. So we've got lots of moves to still make in here. The fence is not complete. That's a whole nother story. Maybe I'll get to that one day. But everything here will be newly seeded, beautiful grass, and then those benches, I can't wait to see them. And then I cannot wait to share with you how it's going to look with the boxwoods and the new Scentable line coming in from Star. So looking down here, you can see that we moved our wind chimes. The viburnum is giving us some beautiful fall color. We extended the bed here, and I'm just praying that everything comes back. I've got some beautiful color from the red bud still. Chardonnay. Chardonnay is losing her sight and her hearing. Hi, sweetie. And sometimes she gets startled when I come up on her. So here we are. I've got some cans. Those are milkweed, and I just haven't figured out the right spot for them. They can be a little bit unwieldy, but they're wonderful for butterflies, and that is their preferred food. Let's see. I'm going to show you a little bit further. I've got to continue my mulching along here. The lamb's ear is looking so pretty with dew on it. Lamb's ear during the winter will look terrible. It dies back completely to the ground. It's twiggy, it's brown, but I do love the way that it looks during the growing season. So this is our side bed. I see Carding Mill still in bloom. Winchester Cathedral has a couple of blooms. Sonnenwald going crazy. I have not cut it back yet. I see Princess Charlene de Monaco here. Benjamin Britten. Beautiful color from the Limelight Prime hydrangea. And if we look over here, this is my work for the coming week. I need to finish getting all this mulch down. You can see I've covered my benches, so I'm slowly picking away at a winter checklist of things to do. And in the coming season, you'll see all of these beds I've expanded and they need to be mulched. If you haven't seen Pom Pom Veranda. Pom Pom Veranda has really tiny buds. This is it. And they really don't open for me beyond this. and I love it because I just picture this in a vase, an arrangement, and how pretty it would look. If you received raspberry cream in place of, raspberry cupcake in place of top cream, it's a pretty rose. That's its age down. I can see the edges are a little brown, but it has been on the rose for a while. Let's see. I've got drifts in bloom. I see one other one here I want to share with you that you haven't seen yet. This is Morning Glow. So I hope that you enjoyed walking around and seeing everything that I've got going on. So thanks so much. I'll see you in the next one.